mindfulness to help your kids. A lot of the central problems right now are that we're stuck at home. Play dates aren't happening. Teenagers can't necessarily go to events and see their friends. We're all sort of stuck together, sometimes in close quarters, and we're not getting the breaks that we had from each other before. And because of that, there's a lot of negative emotions like thoughts and feelings. And so, how you can help kids to essentially use mindfulness to make this experience more bearable. Number one, letting children know, no matter how old or young they are, that the thoughts and feelings that they're having are normal and they're okay and they're part of this experience. Number two, the thoughts and feelings and behaviors that they're exhibiting or experiencing are actually an opportunity to learn and grow. And number three, the thoughts and feelings that they're having, especially during this crisis, whether it's fear of germs or fear of other people, or having confusion about what social interaction is safe and what isn't, or trying to understand how mom and dad's roles may have changed in the house, whatever that may look like, essentially teaching them that it's okay to have those thoughts and feelings, to make room for those thoughts and feelings to be there, that it's an opportunity to learn and grow, and that experiencing discomfort is an essential part of their day-to-day life. So I feel like so much of our time is teaching children to avoid negative thoughts and feelings and even physical discomfort. And this is an opportunity to teach them that if they face their problems and their fears or their anxieties or their anger head on, that'll be actually much easier to deal with it, and that there's room for that to be okay. So the funny thing is that my children are young. I have a 3 and 6-year-old. And I actually find that I have an easier time talking to little kids about mindfulness than I do older kids, because I feel like smaller kids are actually more naturally more mindful. They don't have a lot at the same, often like social pressure or embarrassment to fully express themselves. But just to make it like very clear and concrete, so with like the small child, if you see that they're expressing fear or upset feelings or sadness or loss or anger, or even if you see that they're not really expressing anything, but you're trying to validate what they might be experiencing on the inside, you can say something along the lines, Riley, when we have thoughts and feelings that don't feel good or that are upsetting, it's actually a chance for us to grow. So if you feel like you need to cry, go ahead and cry. And if you feel like you need time to scream, we can put aside time in the day, literally schedule time for you to scream into your pillow and express all the angry feelings. And if you're wondering why you can't see your friends anymore, or you're upset about how that makes you feel, talking about loneliness or anger isn't going to make mommy and daddy angry, and it's not going to make you more lonely and angry. It's going to help you have that feeling, and it's going to have a beginning, a middle, and end. And we're going to make room as a family for that to be okay, and for that to be an opportunity for us to be stronger, to deal with this together as a family. And you're not alone in those thoughts and feelings. Other people are feeling that way too. So that's the little kids. The older kids, I think, would be essentially maybe just a little bit more layered way of expressing that. And you could express that maybe one-on-one, like I'm imagining maybe you have 2 or 3 kids. So I feel like with the older kid, you may want to try talking to them about mindfulness first one-on-one, and then sort of bringing it up as a family, as like a daily concept. But I feel like teenagers more readily express like anger and frustration, and sometimes they don't know who to blame. One of the problems with teenagers, look, teenagers are angry, right? Even before COVID, they're angry. So one of the problems with teenagers is they're having this awakening, and they're sort of evolving from this euphoric experience of being a kid where you feel like everything is good, and if they're not, your parents are going to take care of it. And teenagers sort of have this free-falling experience where they sort of fall out of love with what they thought life was, and they get this rude awakening of what life actually is. And as a result, they become very angry. But because their brains aren't fully developed, they don't have a whole lot of insight. So anger and lack of insight can make it very difficult at times, especially for parents. So I think what you can do with the teenager is something along the lines of, if they're expressing anger outright, or fear of getting sick, or fear of something happening to their parents. Or I'm also imagining rebellion, like this is what I want to do. And you're telling me I can't leave the house and I haven't seen my friends in 2 months and I'm doing it anyways. In that specific example, I'm imagining saying something like, even though I'm setting up these rules and these expectations to keep you safe and keep you alive, it hurts me every day seeing what you've lost. And I've lost things too. And it's okay in a limited way to say, I miss my friends. I miss going to my events. I miss my gym. I miss taking you to school and having some time for freedom and creativity to work on my projects at home. It's okay for you to have those experiences, but it's not okay to put yourself in danger, even though it feels like maybe this is my fault and I'm blocking you from what you want and you feel angry. There's better ways of communicating the anger and the fear that you feel rather than lashing out at me. Again, fortunately and unfortunately, I'm going through these very same experiences at the same time. One of the things that, just being a psychologist, I'll put aside, but one of the things that I've struggled with as we've gone deeper into COVID is sort of grieving for my kids. And it's hard to explain, but I guess because they're not as sophisticated as the adults are, I'm experiencing loss for them because I'm seeing the loss of school. I'm seeing the loss of structure. I'm seeing the loss of friends. And the kids, especially being young, and as a psychologist, I'm afraid, well, this is a critically developmental time. Like, how is this going to affect them in terms of later on as an adult, potentially fear of leaving the house, agoraphobia, fear of germs? They're already, because of devices and the way our society is sort of set up, what is going to happen in terms of social anxiety and avoidance of one another? And now is that being justified and validated? And what is that going to do to my kids' mental health? So that's sort of hard to find a balance between protecting myself from what's happening due to COVID, but also validating my children's experiences and helping them find words for the loss that they're experiencing, right? Because COVID isn't just about washing hands, and it's not just about social distancing. It's about loss and grief. And not necessarily because somebody got sick and died, although that may be the case. Loss and grief also has to do with a loss of what your day-to-day existence was, and a loss of the innocence of an 8-year-old who you've spent 8 years protecting from the real world, and it's coming charging through your front door and there's nothing you can do about it. Mindfulness, to me, is speaking to that and allowing yourself time every day to recognize what the challenges are, make room for them to be okay, honor them by speaking about them, but also giving yourself permission to do what you can in terms of managing it. And the remnants that are left over that are not okay, making room for that to be okay. Because the word pandemic literally refers to the god Pan, meaning chaos and danger and fear. And so there's no circumventing this experience. And mindfulness argues that if you think about all of the experiences that went well in your life, like if you went to a St. Andrews football game and your kid made honor roll and you're killing it at work and you're getting along with your spouse, ask yourself, did you grow from those experiences? Did you learn a lot from those experiences? And then ask yourself about a crisis that you went through in the past that you survived, and ask yourself, was the learning curve, was the growth more profound, more meaningful? Did it last longer? Did it leave you with more compassion, more forgiveness, deeper insight, and a better ability to sort of deal with life on life's terms instead of how you decide life should be? Kids experience and exhibit grief differently than adults. And also, grief is I know it's an intense word, but there's also experiences, especially right now, that kids go through that is just mental health related and developmental, that's normal. So essentially just reacting to stress. And one of the things that I've noticed about kids is a lot of times they just don't directly express it. You're not always going to see tears, and that they're going to cite like COVID or loss of friend experiences for the reason for crying. And I feel like adults do that too, to a certain extent. You'll get like really upset because the toaster's not working and you're banging the toaster on the counter. And then all of a sudden you realize, obviously it's not about the toaster, it's about the fallout from COVID. Kids are like that to a certain extent, but I think it's not as obvious. So I would ask that parents just, you don't want to put your kids under a microscope and keep asking them, like, are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay? Because they're really resilient, probably more resilient and equipped to deal with a crisis than adults are. But you want to look for temper tantrums, more crying. Obviously, you're going to see more fighting with siblings, so I wouldn't worry about that. I think that's just because we're all stuck together. With the little kids, sometimes you might see bedwetting, you might see more nightmares, you might see kids a little bit older than you would expect crawling into bed with you. And for the parents, it feels overwhelming because before you were doing probably the job as a parent of 2 or 3, and now you're doing the job of 4 to 6 with zero personal time and zero downtime. I would actually recommend, if you can, like just as a preemptive way, just to help your kids, just schedule some one-on-one time with each kid to do something that either that they're going to like, or I find it easier to do something that I like. So, for example, I like gardening. I like cooking. I find that when I play with toys and dolls with my kids, I feel frustrated because it's not authentic because I don't like it. But if you can do an activity that you enjoy doing just one-on-one with your kid, or even just spending time alone together that's scheduled every day just for you and them, even if it's just 10 or 15 minutes, and you do the activity first and allow the child to sort of calm down a little bit and feel connected and feel safe in that connection. And then you can make some time to ask some guided questions like, honey, since the coronavirus came, I've really been missing my friends, and I've really been missing the feeling I had when I went to work. And sometimes when I'm by myself, those feelings become so big in my chest that I don't really know what to do with them. And just ask them, like, what are your feelings like since the coronavirus? And then just check in. And if it seems like they're okay and there's nothing major going on, then let it be. You don't want to start creating problems where they're not. But sometimes, even with the little ones, I can tell you, I asked my 6-year-old this just as like a personal anecdote. This is not something that any of that you have to do, but I decided, giving each of the kids to have some personal time, that I would do like a sleepover with each child once every 2 weeks, which they really look forward to. And on the first sleepover with my daughter, who's 6, I pretty much told her the exact same thing I just told you. And I asked her, what scares you about the coronavirus? I was shocked that she said, I'm afraid, what if you and dad die? And she's 6 years old. And I know there may be some tears welling up. I know it's hard for me to say it, but I never even had an opportunity to address that with her, because I never imagined in a million years that a 6-year-old would be sophisticated enough to even worry about that. So, what I'm saying to the parents out there, in terms of mindfulness and especially COVID, don't be afraid to ask your kids these type of questions. You're not going to put it into their head. You'll have an opportunity to offer them guidance and make them feel safe. But if you don't know what they're actually thinking or feeling, then you lose that chance.